Hi everyone, President Henry Reyenga here with Dr. Roy Clouser, and we are launching a philosophy program, Christian philosophy program, and one of the things I was curious about was Dr. Herman Dooyeweerd, because I was a philosophy major. I studied Dr. Herman Dooyeweerd, and I'm kind of a nostalgic type person. I can imagine in my mind what was he like, and who do I know that met Dr. Dooyeweerd, and then I found out that Roy, you not only met him, but tell us your story of how you came to meet him, how that worked out. And then I have a few questions as you're talking. Okay, so.
When I was a senior in seminary in Philadelphia, Dooyeweerd came to Philadelphia and gave 5 lectures, and I went to hear them. And I became very fascinated with the idea that philosophy could be a Christian philosophy. Almost no one has ever thought that was even possible,
right,
let alone tried it. They think that Christians can do philosophy all right, and they have things at stake. They want the philosophy to come out so that it will harmonize with belief in God.
Right.
But they take the two as already given. This is what philosophy is. Here's belief in God. How do we harmonize the two on the interface? And no, he says that we start with God and we construct a theory of reality guided by belief in God. And so I was really interested in that. When I finished up my work, undergraduate philosophy degree and then the BD at seminary, I wanted to go to graduate school. And after a number of failures, vicissitudes of life.
By the way, I love the word vicissitude. And I just want that to be on the record here.
So I entered graduate school, and then when I was far enough along to choose a dissertation topic, I proposed writing on Dooyeweerd. And the faculty member there, who was my advisor, said, okay, we're going to prove this on 2 conditions. One is that you go there and work on it with him. And he got me a Harrison Fellowship and sent me over. So the second is that he writes me a letter and says, you got him right. Because nobody here is going to read all that stuff and examine you and whether you got him right.
Okay.
He says you got him right, we're going to examine you and whether you think he is right. Okay, which makes sense. That's right. Fair enough. So, so I spent an entire summer in Amsterdam seeing Dooyeweerd one night a week.
Okay, so Dooyeweerd just says, yes, come in, American, come in. I mean, how does that, I mean, this is, so they did this all like on the table for you?
No. When I arrived, the university had very kindly set up appointments with me, and the secretary of the philosophy department went all over this stuff. He says, then this day you're going to see Vollenhoven, and here you're going to see Van Riesen, and you have a conference with Zouderman, this person, that person, and then next Tuesday night you have an appointment to see Dooyeweerd.
Okay.
And I said, what?
Like Tuesday night.
One appointment?
You are scheduled here all summer long.
That's right. I just borrowed against my salary and plus had the fellowship, and in order to get there, I'm there for the entire summer, and looks like the next 13 weeks is going to be a long summer if I'm not seeing him. I mean,
well, you could just kind of take some rides on the dikes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So this fellow says, well, look, he's retired. I mean, he doesn't even work here anymore. It's up to him if he wants to see you again.
Right.
So on the way, I'm riding on the tram toward Dooyeweerd's house thinking, what am I going to say that's going to get him to invite me back? I was clueless when I walked out the door. So his housekeeper showed me in and went up to the study, and he said, how can I help you? And I decided to tell him what had happened over the past week. This past week, I've seen 5 or 6 people here at the university, and every one of them has told me that I'm not understanding you correctly. So why don't I tell you what I think's going on and it's his major work, The New Critique of Theoretical Thought, 4 volumes. He said, well, I'll tell you what I think is going on. You stop me when I go wrong. Okay. And he said, go ahead. So, all right, so I start. 45 minutes later, he starts laughing. He says, who told you that's wrong? That's what I want to hear. Okay, so it's not wrong. So I mentioned the people, and he shook his head. He said, there's so many misunderstandings. So I then said, well, if that is right, I have a problem. And I took a piece of paper and I put down in logical symbols the main claims that are premised in his philosophy and the main conclusion that he wants to draw. And I constructed a proof that it was an invalid argument and slid it across the desk to him.
Okay.
So he said nobody ever made that criticism before. And it was pretty obvious what needed to be done to fix that. I mean, it wasn't tricky or anything, but we discussed how to meet that need for another 20 minutes or so, and he said, well, it's getting late, when can you come back? So, and the answer is I didn't say every Tuesday night or as often. I said, I'd come back next week, fine. So every Tuesday night throughout the summer, I got to go and talk with him for 2 to 3 hours. Now, there's another piece of that worked out real well. Johann van der Hoeven was much younger than Dooyeweerd. He's maybe 7 or 8 years older than I.
Okay.
Maybe 10. But Johann was a very sharp, very subtle thinker who knew British and American philosophy, I'd say, even better than Dooyeweerd. And he was the professor of modern philosophy. And your viewers need to know that in philosophy, modern means 1600 to 1800.
Okay.
Not what's going on now.
Right, yeah,
okay, so he specialized in that period. And I would see him on Wednesday morning. So Tuesday night I'm at Dooyeweerd's house. Wednesday morning I go see Johann, and I said, last night I said this to Dooyeweerd. How can this be? And then here's his reply. Now, how is that a reply? And I get something like, oh yeah, I see why it wouldn't be for me. Well, think of it this way. And he turns the thing around a little bit, and there's another way to come at it. It was hugely helpful that every night after seeing Dooyeweerd, I saw Johann on the next morning. And that was just enormously helpful. And then when I finished writing the dissertation, I proposed to Dooyeweerd that I come back and go over it with him. And he said that was a good idea, because communicating by letter doesn't cut it when you're trying to discuss this stuff. So the university gave me, bought my airline ticket, and the van der Hoevens put me up for a month.
Isn't that something?
And I saw Dooyeweerd twice a week, and for about 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks. And, and then came back and made all the revisions and submitted the dissertation for defense, which is not, in this country, that's not just a social event. In Europe, if you've come up for the defense, you're going to pass and you're going to get the degree. In the US, if you come up for defense, you can fail. And people have been failed. So
it was a big deal. So a couple of things. First of all, just notice Dr. Clouser's desire to get a mentor, to ask questions, to aspire to be around people that he respected, that he wanted to learn from. So if you look back at that time, here's just some questions I personally have. When I studied Dr. Dooyeweerd, who would by the time I studied in the 1980s, 81, 82, 83, finished my philosophy program at Dordt College, Dr. Dooyeweerd had already been dead, because he died in
1977, I think.
77.
The first summer I saw him was 67. And then the second, when I went back to go over it, was August to September of 71.
So it's 218 right now. So he has been deceased for 41 years.
Well.
So I mean, time, it just seems like your whole life, our life goes by.
Goes right by, yes.
And you were with him in 68, you said?
The first summer that I spent the whole summer there with him was 67.
67.
Yeah.
So and that's 51 years ago.
Yes.
So 51 years ago, and you're with him, and then you went back again. So tell me about his house a little bit. I mean, I'm just curious, where did he live?
He lived on Oranje Nassalaan, which is near the Vondel Park, and his house was number 13. It's a whole row of what we might call here a brownstone. They're all the row houses, 3 stories high, and his study was up on the 3rd floor. He told me that during the war, everybody went up to their attics and knocked the attic partitions out and had a BBC, a radio receiver.
So that was the same house he lived in the war?
Oh, yeah, he lived there. I don't know when he moved there, but he lived there almost all his life. Yeah.
So in the war, was he a professor at the time of the war?
Yes, he was not a philosophy professor. I don't know if you know that. He was a professor in the law school.
He wrote philosophy and another philosophy.
He's a professor in the law school. So he taught law. And it was reflections on the foundations of the law that led him to construct the whole ontology as a Christian theory of reality. So in large measure, one of the reviewers called him an autodidact, someone who taught himself.
Okay.
Because that was not his main field of study. I think he majored in philosophy as an undergraduate, but then he wrote in the philosophy of law. So he only taught law courses in the law school.
While he was a philosopher.
Well, he wrote all this philosophy.
He was a law teacher.
He was a law professor. So, and he told me that one night after the Nazis had taken over the government in the Netherlands, that he was lecturing at the university, and someone asked him, someone in the class asked him what he thought of the recent Nazi edicts that they had been saying, you will do this and this and this.
Yeah.
And he made an allusion to Nero, who had his mother murdered. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And he said, Nero's lawyer once said, it's easier to commit a murder than to defend somebody from one. That's what he quoted. And he said he saw a couple people duck out right away. He figured they were Gestapo agents and that they reported them. And sure enough, the next night, as he sat at dinner, there was a knock at the door. And it was a member of the Dutch Underground that said, don't pack, don't do anything, walk right out of the house and follow me, the Gestapo are on the way.
Wow. Yeah. So now, this is, I don't know about this story. So anyway, he leaves.
Yes, and they hid him out for a long time. And he told me he got so lonely for his family that he sneaked back into Amsterdam and knocked on his own door. And when the housekeeper opened the door, she yelled, run, they were just here, and he never got to see anyone. He had to again take off.
In hiding.
And hiding. I don't know how long he was actually in hiding.
But he was in hiding in World War II.
Yes, oh yeah,
that
sure.
The Nazis were going after him.
Yes, he was on the list to be arrested, shipped to some work
camp or whatever. Well, and like people in that time who were not for the Nazis risked their very life.
Oh yeah.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer was
a lot of people risked their lives saving other people too.
Right. Yeah. I know my mother's family hid Jews and actually other Dutch countrymen in the farms in Friesland. And in fact, today, she's now 88, and she still has post-traumatic stress syndrome, sort of symptoms about, people knocking on the door.
So
I mean, it was a very difficult time in reality.
As an undergraduate, I also had a professor who was German, and he was in Germany during the war. And one night, the Gestapo agents knocked on his door. Herr Professor, have you seen any of the runaway Jews? And he said no, and he had 20-some in his basement. Yeah, he was helping to get out of the country when the guy knocked.
Okay, so after the war, he gets reunited, and now was he really married then? I mean, he probably had a family.
Oh yeah, he was married when the Gestapo when the Dutch Underground came to warn him about the Gestapo the first time. He had 12 children.
12? Yeah. 12 children. Our Dr. Fettis has 8. That's even 4 more than Dr. Fettis. So he had...
But 8 less than Bach.
Right. So he had 12 children. Yeah. And then after the war, he gets reunited, starts up his teaching again.
Sure. The university, I don't think the university ever completely closed down. Okay. What happened was that rather than obey the German edicts, they officially shut it down, and the professors met all the students in their houses, so that things could go on anyway. And that was hard for the Nazis to do anything about. It's their own home. You really got to go in there and haul them out for teaching people? Yeah. Well, maybe that's not where we need to exert our energy.
Right. Well, and the war was a very challenging time for a lot of people. Yeah. And by God's grace, many people lived. I mean, Amsterdam is where Anne Frank was arrested.
The Anne Frank house is there. I've been in it.
Yeah. And so it's a center of great heroism of the Dutch resistance and Jews who sought to survive very difficult circumstances, and Dutch who helped that. It's a kind of a testimony of the love of God in various people.
It happened all over, not just Amsterdam. In Rotterdam, there's a famous incident that the Nazis, having taken over one of the biggest ports in the world, now have a way to get their goods around, and so the longshoremen wouldn't unload a Nazi ship, and they all He said, no, we're not doing it. So the commandant comes down, he orders this guy out, and they hang him right in front of the crowd.
Ooh.
Now are you going to unload the ship? They said, now we'll never unload the ship.
Right.
And the Germans had to take a division off the field to operate the port. There's a statue to this guy. There's a big burly looker.
Right.
In Rotterdam Harbor in memory of the men that defied the Nazis.
So go back to Dooiward. We kind of got off the track a little bit. That's okay. Everybody knows I can get off the track sometimes. Okay, so after the war, he gets into the teaching profession, and
he was already professor.
Right, but I'm sorry, he was getting back into his teaching and all of that, and he retired from the Free University in
somewhere around 65. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And then you saw him, of course, in 68. Where's some of the 70? Where are some of the distinctive 67? Where are some of the distinctive personal characteristics of him that if you were to meet him, you'd notice, like, oh?
Well, I found him to be very gracious, very kind about the use of his time, to take the time with me. He not only did that, he invited me to dinner both times, like the first summer, and then when I came back for a month to go over.
Did he pray before he ate? He prayed?
Yes.
Did you ever read the Bible too and all that stuff?
In Dutch.
But in Dutch?
Yeah, but I thought at that moment that it was very significant that I would be privileged to hear him pray.
What was his prayer like? Was it the same prayer?
He began both times, Our Father in heaven.
Oh, okay.
Onze Vader in de hemel.
In the hemel.
Yeah.
The Onze Vader in the hemel. You know what? I remember my grandfather. He was a good Dutchman. They babysat me when I was a kid. Onze Vader in de hemel. I do remember that.
Yeah. And I found him to be kindly.
Okay.
Of course, it's intimidating to sit and talk to somebody who's read almost everything anybody ever wrote. It's just, it's overwhelming.
So his mind was incredibly intense.
Yes. And he held all these conversations with me in English, but he could have done just as well in French or German.
Really?
Yeah.
So so you're talking to him in English.
Yes.
And he's a
I don't speak Dutch, French, and German. I know one language only. I have the American disease. I can't ask for the men's room and directions in 5 languages. That's it. I can't hold a conversation.
Well, what about, did he ever get frustrated with you? Because here this young buck comes there.
No, he didn't.
And taking his time and all that.
And one night he asked me if I would mind if we shared our session, and another young fellow who was working, a student at the Free University, came and joined us, and it was a 3-way conversation. And that night he said, why don't we just turn the lights out and do this in the dark?
The whole conversation?
Yeah, that was nice. It was a nice evening. It was quiet, it was cool, and it was a very pleasant thing to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. The whole conversation was in the dark as you talked. Yeah. Why did he do that?
I think it was just easier. It had been a bright sunny day, and maybe he thought it would be more peaceful to have the discussion in the dark. It's the only time it happened.
So, was there anything that you look back at? Was he was his wife still with him, or was he alone at this time?
No, his wife had died some years before.
Oh, some years. Okay. Yeah. So he was at that point alone. And of course, he had a housekeeper.
Yeah, a housekeeper. That's right. And I think some of his children were still in the Netherlands, so they may have seen him from time to time. By and large, they were pretty spread out.
The children were.
Yeah.
They got married.
Yeah.
And met people, and some went to America or Canada, and some maybe South Africa. Who knows? I mean, those were places where a lot of people
I knew one of them, Herman Dooiward Jr., who had moved to England and then to Canada. Mm-hmm. And very, very wonderful guy, just great fellow. We got along great. And at lunch one time, somebody asked him this: you were born in the Netherlands, you grew up there, and then you lived in England for quite a while, and now you're in Canada. What's the best place to live? And
Okay.
he said, well, not the Netherlands. He said, as soon as you meet anybody in Holland, they want to know what you think about everything, and they argue with you.
Okay.
Okay, in England, nobody ever asks anybody else what they think.
Right.
It's considered unspeakable.
Right.
You wouldn't do that. That's kind of another extreme. He said, I think Canada's just a nice compromise.
Right.
He liked
so
Canada.
he liked Canada.
Yeah.
So that's where his son,
Yeah.
Herman Doyward Jr., moved to.
And he was vice president of the Bank of Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So launched a very successful
Yeah, sure.
son. Is he still living today? We don't know.
It's sad. As far as I know, Herman is still alive, but he suffered a stroke some years
Okay.
ago and has been incapacitated
Okay.
ever since. Yeah.
So now when you were ending that time there and you knew that, it's like those moments in life that you actually got to be with one of the foremost Christian philosophers. What were some of your reflections on that? Why did you think you were picked?
I thought that
to
was
do
a big
that?
deal then. I thought
Okay.
this is a terrific opportunity, and I regarded it as an answer to prayer, as a way to get at Christian philosophy, see what he meant by that and how he developed it. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and so I thought that I had been given a treasure, and now I had to do something with it. So
Right.
that's why I wrote the books I did. And, yeah.
Well, and I feel like you're being responsible. I mean, I feel this way. How does an 80-year-old from New Jersey come out to Michigan? And he does not only come out here for a few days, gives a couple presentations. This is the last day that Dr. Roy Clouser has been taping. We're all done with 2 college-level classes. So much discussion, so much speaking. And I can say, and I want to compliment you, that you felt it was a treasure then.
Yeah.
And even here, 51 years later, you're sharing that treasure.
I still think it's a treasure.
Well, again, you do.
Yes.
I'm just saying, you've been responsible, and we thank you for being connected to Christian Leaders Institute and
My
to
pleasure.
share these classes and what you've learned and more. And again, you've had your own, yourself as a STEAM professor, so you honor a professor, and you yourself have been given many awards, over the years. So we feel it's a treasure, and I believe that those who take these classes, get to know you, get to know Dr. Herman Doyward, that treasure is continuing to be given, and now to be given all over the world. So I want to thank
Happy to
you
do
for
it.
sharing a little bit more about Dr. Herman Doyward and some of your own experiences.